What is going on, everybody? Today, I am like seriously so excited. So excited. We're back with the Origin Story podcast. I will be one of your hosts, the not as good looking as my co-host Sam Singh here. My name is Logan Manzanares, and today we have a even better looking guest today, Marlon Mindset Johnson, and we're gonna go into his origin story. We're gonna learn about how he does what he does, and everyone sees him today. The guy is he's Mindset Marlon for a reason, right? He has a program where he literally helps people get through their mindset. He helps people be able to connect the dots that's going on in their brainium, and he does it all for like it's an amazing freaking price. Like it is ridiculous. And so we'll definitely touch on that at the end of this podcast today. But he's also a real estate investor. He buys houses. He mainly invests. We'll talk about in Wisconsin, Milwaukee specifically. A former parkour athlete, which dang, like how diverse is that? And I know this personally, the guy has a metabolism of a freaking cheetah. Dude can eat and like literally hungry for breakfast the very next freaking meal. It's insane, right? Uh, but without further ado, Sam, please bring us in, introduce us to this wonderful human being, Marlon Johnson.
Thank you, Logan. Guys, I'm super excited about this one because Mindset Marlon freaking Johnson. I can't say your name without putting freaking in the middle. You're that special. This one's super important to me, and here's one of the reasons why. When I first got into this mentorship, into Sub 2 in our community, you were someone that I looked up to in a big way, and you were this like ethereal character that was like kind of distant and out of reach, and you reached out to me one day. And you and I had an amazing call, and I will remember that call for the rest of my life. I think we went for 2 hours, and it was very much a leader pouring into an aspiring leader. And I will get into this later, but my trajectory in this space and me coming into my own as an effective leader who is helping create more, that wouldn't have happened if I didn't meet you when I did, if you didn't pour into me the way that you did. And then here's another thing. The origin story, my involvement in the origin story would never have happened if I didn't see what you did last year, right? Last year when I just got in, I was like, oh man, that Marlon, that guy is killing it with his podcast. And I'm seeing him network and meet amazing people. And I'm like, I want that for me too. I hate the idea of a podcast. I'm terrified of it, but I know that I wanted to do one. And I made it a goal for 2022 to make one, and just things manifested the right way. Bro, you were actually one of the primary reasons that I decided to get into the podcasting space, and it has blessed my life. And I know your story. It is an amazing, beautiful, powerful story. And I want everyone watching to see it too and to hear it directly from you. Take us in, man.
Wow. First off, Logan, Sam, thank you both so much for having me here. That's an amazing introduction. I really do feel honored to be here and to be on this platform right now. So I'm hoping my goal is I can share some value with everybody today. So, it's interesting, right? As I was thinking about where the story begins for me, I'm going to have to bring you back pretty deep, right? I'm going to have to actually bring you back to my childhood to get an understanding of who I am, because I'm Mindset Marlon now. I'm very focused on the mindset. However, growing up, I wasn't the same person. I wasn't the same outspoken character. I wasn't somebody that had a lot of, courage and a lot of confidence in myself. So that had to be developed over time. See, as I was being raised, I, came from a, very tight-knit Caribbean family. And we were I was the youngest of three. And with that, I came into a strict household where my family was just very, very closed off to the rest of the world, if this makes any sense, right? I didn't get a lot of exposure to, being in other people's homes and things of that nature. So I only knew my life and my world. And my siblings and I, we didn't really get along as much as I wish we would have. So I spent a lot of time pretty much by myself or just with my family, and not really being able to plug into anybody my age. So as a young child, this left me in a place of almost like a mental seclusion. I constantly found myself just having to entertain myself, having to think a lot and reflect a lot, and being a very observant young person. My family, my parents would take me out with them when we would go places, and they would introduce me to all of their adult friends. and I always had to put on this mask and this persona of, how's school? School's great. I learned how to give answers to please other people. So this was essentially like a part of like my core foundation as I was being raised. I was learning how to present well and be a certain type of person for everybody else, right? Education was very important for my parents. So after school, I would come home, I would do homework, and I would do additional schoolwork. There wasn't much hanging out with friends. There was no TV, there was no video games. And hopefully no one thinks I'm complaining. Like, I actually think I had a great childhood, but it, just like I said, it left me to being secluded, really spending a lot of time by myself and a lot of time inside my own head. So when I would be inside my own head, what I would do is I was always asking the question, why? I was just always thinking, always letting the wheels work in my mind, trying to figure out, hey, like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Why do my parents want me to go and speak to so many adults? Why are there no kids here? I'm just constantly asking questions and observing people, asking the question why. And that stuck with me. So it stuck with me so much to the point where as I got a little bit older, let me kind of fast forward you here to middle school. I found myself in an interesting predicament where my parents, because education was so important, they saw to it that I went to a private school. And when I went to this private school, get this, Sam, here's what's really funny. I show up to the first day, we're wearing like these uniforms, and I step into the building. And when I step into the building, I look around and I noticed something that was very different about this school in comparison to the school I went to before. And the thing that's very different about this school is me. So I looked down for the very first time and I realized, holy crap, I'm black. Like, no joke. One of 6 black people inside this entire school. Not a big deal, except my brain is now starting to ask questions of like, whoa, hey, why is my skin different than their skin? Right. And they had a different culture. So I started exploring a different culture. I started exploring different people. And again, like, this constant obsession of asking the question why led me to wondering, what else is different about people? What else is different about life? I just became like obsessed with wanting to understand different people and different avenues. So yeah, it's really interesting. Actually, it's funny. Like, I don't often go back into the past. So as like I'm really like living the past right now and thinking about like the story of why I am the way I am, it came from just asking these questions of why. So I'm gonna fast forward a little bit to where I feel like I need to bring you guys right now, which
So,
is
Marlon, let me pause you for
Mhm.
1 second. So tell us a little bit about where'd you grow up at, and tell us a little bit about kind of your family dynamic. Like, were your parents entrepreneurs? Where did they have W-2 jobs? Like, tell us a little bit about the household that you grew up in. Like, how old were your brother, your siblings in comparison to you as well?
Yep. So my family, not entrepreneurs at all. Um, both parents worked full W-2 jobs.
Okay.
Family, they were always at work. I was raised basically by my grandmother. My brother and sister are older than me. Like I said, we didn't spend a lot of time together. And, like the path was go to school, get a good education, and live that American dream. My family were immigrants that came to this country. So
Okay.
that was the path that was laid out for me.
And then go back to that the story you described when you first realized that you were black, and the most of your classmates in this new private school were not black, right? And so, like, was that just something that you were observant, or was there someone who said something? And then, like, was there an actual, like, did you get treated differently? Like, describe kind of that process.
Yeah, so here's what was interesting about that, right? I wasn't treated any differently per se, right? Like, not in a negative way, but
Yeah.
I did notice that they had a lot of questions, right? They actually were very curious. I was like, hey, what's up with your hair? What's up with this? What's up with that? And I was also very curious to them. I had the same sort of questions going back. And what was most interesting to me is like the they did a lot of things that were different. They were into different sports, into different TV shows, into different music, and it was
Yeah.
all very normal, right? And at the same time, it was all very different. So it had a feeling of everything was different but normal at the same time, which was just really odd for me as a young man because it got me wondering what else is in this world that's so different and normal, right? Is
Right.
our way of life the only way of life to live? And that stuck with me actually all these years because curiosity really like took a hold of me. Curiosity really made me want to understand, hey, how are other people living? Are there other ways to do life aside from the way that's been presented to me? Because in my family, I'm a bit of the black sheep still, and like I'm grateful for that. However, growing up, my brother, basketball player, hung out with all the guys in the neighborhood, and I didn't quite fit into that story. It didn't resonate with me. So it was just a little bit of odd. I was an outsider in my own community, and I was an outsider in this new area that I was learning how to fit in. So I was learning how to become an outsider in somewhere that I wasn't naturally put into, an environment that I wasn't naturally a part of. And that taught me to really adapt, and it taught me to learn how to connect with different types of people because I had to learn their world. I had to learn their language in order to just connect and really communicate and make friends and make relationships. And that's been extremely helpful because as I learned to connect with them, it taught me how to connect a little bit more with myself as well.
So I've got to say this. That is, I know a lot of your story, but I've never heard that specifically, right? And getting to be at a young age, and then basically having to ask almost existential questions, right? It's something that, the norm, right? For all those, let's just say the 98% of the rest of that school, they're in their normal. They don't ask these questions, and they may never have, in my opinion, the privilege or the benefit of getting to ask those questions. So I believe that there is a benefit to it. And knowing you now, one of the things that I always immediately stuck out of my brain about you is that you are tremendously curious about other human beings and what makes them tick. There's a lot of people out there who are curious about other human beings so they can label them, so they can just say that this person is this way, and they know to attach that label to them in their head for the rest of their lives. It's totally different. This is one of the first things that I remember thinking about you was that you're curious about people to help yourself understand their motivations, their intentions, their workflows. And now that all kind of comes full circle because I've been in somewhat of a similar position growing up because you and I have relatively similar backgrounds.
Mhm.
And even though it was completely West Coast to East Coast, right? There's a similarity there. So that it's sticking out in my mind in a big way right now. Um, okay, so but please continue.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting you say that, right? Because when I look at again, like it's so interesting, right? I really don't live in my past. As far as like the way my mind works and the way my brain works, it's always been a very future thinking mind. I've been a very present person that always my mind would drift off into these futures, drift off into these imagined realities. And when I look back, my past is beautiful because it allowed me to become the person I am. But like you said, Sam, at a very young age, I didn't realize this then. My mind was always asking these questions. And I thought so was everybody else's mind. So, to your point of like my curiosity of other people, this is actually what sparked my curiosity of other people. It was me trying to figure out why they were doing what they were doing. See, because I was always so cautious and so calculated about every decision I made, every word I ever said, every action I made when I stepped into a new person's house, when I stepped into this new school, when I approached new friends, I would want to make people feel comfortable, not feel, insecure about themselves because I had all these feelings on the inside of myself, right? I had all these I was so confused and I felt alone, so I didn't want other people to feel confused, alone, or threatened. And so when they would take actions that, in my opinion, would start to make other people feel threatened or confused or things of that nature, I couldn't quite figure out why they would do that. I was trying to figure out what the intent was behind it. And it took me years, Sam, to realize that they a lot of times didn't have an intention. A lot of times
Mhm.
people weren't thinking as deeply as I was, and that I was thinking a little bit outside of what would be considered the norm, right? But years of not understanding this led to just a lot of confusion and a lot more questioning. I was just like constantly trying to figure out, like, man, like why would that person do this? Why would this person do that? And so it just led to a lot of deeper and deeper observation of other humans. Really just trying to understand my friends, trying to understand the adults, trying to understand their parents, my parents, like strangers in the street. I was like obsessed with people, just trying to figure them out.
So I have to ask this. I have to ask this. And for everyone who's watching, if you're watching live or you watch later on, from now on, I want you to pay attention to when Marlon talks about how he does things and his approach to how he views other people. I want everyone to actually pay attention to one specific thing, and that's this recurring theme of being self-aware. Marlon, you and I spoke about this specifically, about getting into rooms and things like that. And self-awareness is something that a lot of people don't necessarily have all the time. And you seem to have it at a very, very young age, which showcases, how you've become who you are now. But let me ask you this: at that age, and this may be me getting a little bit ahead of myself and doing a mindset deep dive. At that age, when you were deep, it's almost like you were doing case studies of people around you, like holistic case studies of finding out why they're doing it, what's going on in their heads, what their backgrounds. You said this. I actually really love that you said this. You were thinking about your parents. You were also thinking about their parents. Like, what in the environment has caused them to operate, think this way, act this way? You were doing this. Did you, at that time, understand why you were doing it? Or was it just your default process?
So in hindsight, that's a great question, Sam. In hindsight, I didn't like at that time, I didn't know like really what I was doing. I can tell you from my personal vantage point at that time, what I was simply trying to do was I was trying to figure out every person what like I was trying to understand what are they doing because I thought they were thinking like me. So I was putting my brain into their body and watching their actions, trying to figure out, wait, what are we doing? Why would we do that? Why would we say that thing? Did we not realize that was going to get us in trouble? Right? And this is like me watching other people. Did we not realize that person was going to be upset when you said that? Didn't you realize you were making that person uncomfortable? Right? And so then I'm trying to trace it back and just really break it down. And ultimately, at some point, I arrived to the conclusion that we don't all think alike. In fact, we are very different humans. We are all very different people, and we think very differently. And that's a very cool thing. So I started getting obsessed. And this is around, like, 'cause I tried figuring this out for a very long time, Sam. Like Logan, guys, I was going through high school trying to figure this out. This started in middle school, the very conscious observations and questioning of other people. And it went all the way through high school. And it wasn't until I got to graduating high school that I finally met somebody that it felt like they finally actually thought similar to me because their actions made sense. Their words were in alignment with their actions, right? I was seeing this connection. I was seeing there was a methodical thought process like, hey, you saw how this would lead to this and you took that course. And they recommended a book to me. It was an older mentor of mine, Leon Williams. Shout out to Leon. He had recommended me to read this book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And when I read that book, it started to explain everything. And I, for the first time, was like, holy moly, I am not alone. Like, I am not the only person that thinks like this. Like, someone else thought like this in the past. And it just started to give me a bit of a blueprint. It started to give me a bit of an instruction manual on how to work this computer, this operating system that we're all blessed to have. And from there, I got very, very intentional. I got very intentional about what I wanted to do. I got very intentional about setting goals for the first time in my life, really like setting goals on purpose, I should say, at least. Because at that time in my life, I had chosen my own path, right? I had been presented a path my entire life of go to college, right? You're going to go to college, figure out what you want to major in, figure out what college you want to go to, figure out where you want to get the scholarship, and then figure out what job you're going to want to have. And, that was kind of the option that was presented to me. And then I found this thing called parkour. And at the same time, this Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And this book is telling me that I can do whatever I put my mind to. And this sport, for whatever reason, has my attention. So I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could just go be like a pro parkour athlete. And that's the route I went and started to make that a reality. I actually made that a reality. But it was from the principles I had learned in that book.
That's amazing. So I'm gonna echo what Sam just talked about as well, is that your awareness is and was your superpower. And you started to realize that you didn't think the same way other people thought, or actually like you thought and other people didn't, really is what it came down to. But you made it sound like all you do is think all day. So let me ask you this: like, did you have any activities that you did along the way that got you to parkour in high school? Like, did you play other sports? Like you said, your brother played basketball. Were you into music? Was there anything else along the way that was also like things that you like tried and maybe didn't connect with until you actually found parkour?
I bet
Yeah,
Marlon's
no,
a hell of a singer.
Yeah.
I wish, man. If I was a singer, it'd be like game over. That's all I would do all day. So actually, it was interesting, right? There was a sport before parkour that I absolutely fell in love with, and I do owe a lot of credit to a lot of things, a lot of life lessons I've learned, which was skateboarding, right? And here's what's really interesting, and why I say it was interesting. I found that even in the world of athletics, I gravitated towards sports and activities that were solo, that involved an individual improving themselves and working at themselves. Because I tried, guys, because like I like one thing I value. You're gonna see this, and you already know this about me. I value relationships. I value connection with other humans. Because so much of the early years of my life, I was looking for that connection, and I couldn't quite figure out how to connect to people because like I mentally internally wasn't calibrated properly. I was trying to connect to people as if they were me versus just understanding myself and connecting to them as who they are.
No.
So it left a lot of confusion as a young man growing up. So when I found skateboarding, I found this activity that allowed me to work on me, that allowed me to work at my skill, at my progression, at my level. And it taught me absolutely amazing life lessons, right? It taught me the power of persistence. It taught me the power of one more try. It actually taught me how to get out of my comfort zone. It taught me how to become an independent individual. I'll skate through the neighborhoods, skate all around town, and just figure things out. And it also left me with an amazing lesson as I graduated from it and moved into parkour, moved into other areas of my life, which was this. Because skateboarding was an individual sport, I enjoyed being able to work on it at my speed and not feel like I was letting a team down. Because that was always one of my biggest things. I didn't want to let people down. So skateboarding was like my opportunity to like, well, it's just me versus me. Right? If I'm on the basketball team or the lacrosse team or the football team, which I was on those sports, but I didn't quite enjoy it because I always felt like I wasn't good enough for my teammates. I always felt like I was going to let my teammates down. And that was something I struggled with. So in skateboarding, I found that this mastermind effect happened. Right now, I know what it was, but back then I didn't know what it was. That when I would go and skate with other people who were at a higher level, I would actually level up, and there wasn't a pressure from them for me to perform because it wasn't like we were, at a competition. We're just all hanging out. So I would enjoy being around people that caused me to progress. The only challenge was I always felt like, man, I want to come back to them even better. I don't want to be the guy that's, again, dragging the team down. So I would tell myself, let me go practice by myself for hours and hours and weeks, and then I'll come back to the group so that I can like give in and pour in. The only challenge with this, I think you guys could see where this is going. When I would go off into isolation, right, and I would come back, the group didn't go into isolation. The group kept coming together as a community, as a squad. They kept leveling up. So when we were here, I would go away, I'd meet them back, they're here, and my skill levels are still only here. And I would go away again, come back, and now I'm here, but their skill levels are up here. So when I finished up with skateboarding, I actually learned this powerful lesson that it's important to plug in with those higher level individuals today, immediately. And that's actually something that I learned in Think and Grow Rich, as well as when I entered parkour, what allowed me to excel as an athlete so quickly in a very short period of time was I immediately beelined for the best athletes I could find. and I just began to train with them. And it was the exact same principle I took when I entered into real estate. It was, I decided like I'm done being by myself. I'm done, you know, I'm going to go and connect with those individuals now, today, from day one.
So there's a power to that, right? What you're basically talking about in the world of athletics, right? You can compare it to real estate, to business, to entrepreneurship, but in the world of athletics, you basically isolated and identified that getting in the room with people who are ahead of you, right? You said this, you would get into these rooms with these high level skaters who were a little bit further along than you. You realize that you weren't at their level, right? And you and I have talked about this in the past. You realize that you weren't at their level. And instead of staying there and grinding with them, you would self eject to go train on your own to see if you could come back. Well, what ends up happening is collectively as a campfire, they just transcend at a faster rate than you can on your own. So to fix that, you decided to get in these rooms, but don't self eject. Stay in them, plug in with them, and then grow with them. That's such a powerful, powerful message to a lot of people. And you and I watch you a lot, and you are phenomenal. I think one of the best I've ever met at getting into rooms with extremely high level people. I think you have a natural knack for it. And this is something we've talked about. A lot of people, they'll find themselves in those positions, and then for whatever reason they come up with, they hit the self eject button. That big bright red button that says eject, they slam it and then they're out. And then, but you had the self-awareness, right, to stay there, to realize what it could do for you to stay there. So guys, everyone watching, like, I really hope you guys take that, because that is absolutely 100%. That's not just Marlon saying it for just saying it as a platitude. Marlon lived the other way. He self-ejected and then saw what happened, and it's not a win. He learned through experience to stay in those rooms, and then the wins come that way. That's absolutely huge.
And let me explain this. I want to say this for, hopefully there's not feedback. I want to say this for like everyone. Like, I just want to like have like a real conversation with people for a second, right? Which is, look, this came from actually when I was younger. When I trace it back, something I wanted to do was I wanted to connect with like my brother and his friends. And like I said, they enjoyed playing basketball. And when I would go and play with them, I'm 6 years younger than my brother. I'm a lot smaller. I can't keep up with the older guys. So I was just feeling like a burden. So it was a total insecurity, I just feel like a burden when I show up. And a lot of people, a lot of us, we struggle with that when we enter into any new space, be it sports, be it business, be it relationships, be it friendships. We feel like when we're brand new, we feel like a burden. And now because of that, we actually pull ourselves out. No one ever actually forces us out. Or in most cases, when you're in the right rooms, in the right campfires, the right circles, no one's actually going to push you out. They actually want you to stay in. However, I couldn't recognize that I was in those right circles, and I was being the one pulling myself out. So after skateboarding and after having done that so many times, I made up my mind, I'm not going to do that again. And so when I entered parkour, and this is the beautiful thing, life is progressive, right? Because although skateboarding had nothing to do with parkour, I was able to take the same life lessons, everything I learned, everything I accumulated, and move it into the next chapter of my life, which was parkour. So when I started in parkour, I wasn't starting as a total noob, right? Technically, in a skill set wise, yes, but mindset, right? As a person, as an individual, I was coming in a higher frequency, a higher level individual that now had learned a thing or two, because I had experience, because I had gone through, it's the same fire. It was just dressed in a different costume that day. It was located somewhere else, but it was the same fire that we had to go through. So I want people to understand that, like, really, if you're in a place right now in your life where you're that new person in the room, stay in the room. In fact, let them kick you out, right? If they kick you out, they're doing you a favor. They're actually showing you that you've been standing at the wrong campfire. But if they don't kick you out, what's going to happen is you will begin to improve.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I was literally just texting a guy who I referred into sub 2, And I asked him, I was like, how many people have you connected with since you've been in the group? He's only been in the group for about a week. He's like, one. I was like, go connect with 25 people. Go make them your friends. He's like, I just kind of feel like I'm a burden. I don't have much to offer. And I just don't want to like impose on people. And it was like what you just said right there. I think a lot of people have that same feeling. So whether it's a community like Sub 2, whether it's a community like parkour or skateboarding or whatever community that you're in, understand that people are not going to kick you out unless they're just a-holes, and then like this is not the community you want to be in anyway. And so I told them very much like you just probably told yourself, was go talk to people. Like you're not burdening people. Like go like figure out how to try to provide as much value as you possibly can, but just also understand that you're new. And so by you just putting yourself out there, like let yourself into the community. And I think that's a lot of what masterminds are. And that's what we're part of with Sub 2 and what you were doing with parkour. I think there's so much value in like just being vulnerable and putting yourself out there. So a lot of that is it's just our own limiting belief. It's not actual reality. Most people, I've never actually met somebody who's more successful than me who's ever said anything negative or gave me any negative feedback. They've actually always been really encouraging, really helpful. And truly, people who are more successful, all they actually want to do is help, and they want to pull you up because you know what, someone helped pull them up as well. So I think that's an amazing message, Marlon. Now describe a little bit about parkour, because I think some people out there maybe not even know what parkour is, but describe a little bit like what parkour is first off, and then secondly, like when you say you were a professional parkour athlete, like explain that process of like what you did from a fundamental level, and then even like your personal growth in being in that sport.
Yeah, 100%. So, for anyone that doesn't know parkour, it's a ridiculously cool movement discipline that has its origins in France. And essentially, it's the ability to scale, climb, traverse, and flip through your environment. So, if anyone's ever seen the movie Casino Royale with James Bond, if you remember that opening scene where they are just like running through the city, vaulting over things, they're climbing and scaling up and down the scaffolding, they're just getting through the environment as efficiently as possible. That's parkour. So I highly recommend, someone YouTube it, because it's one of those things that's much better to be seen than it is to explain. It's kind of like trying to explain dancing to somebody. It's like you want to be able to watch it. So that sport, took a hold of me around the age of 19, and I'm ridiculously grateful for it because I got into it as a means of, I was looking for a new hobby. I was looking for something to replace skateboarding, right? I wasn't much into, like I said, I wasn't much into team sports. I was just entering college, and I saw a video on YouTube. I said, this looks ridiculously cool. I think I can do that. And the very next day I went out and started, doing it. I called up a buddy of mine who was like, hey, you do that parkour stuff, right? Like, hey, do you mind coming out to the school and showing me, some of the fundamentals, showing me some of the basics? And he came out, he met me the next day, and he just started showing me all the basics, and just, I fell in love with it. It was just a lot of fun. But Logan, here's like the really interesting thing. It was the hobby that caught my interest. It was the community that kept me locked in for about 9 years. And it was actually my first time being able to understand that I was a part of a community. So in this community, it was people that were crazy supportive, very similar to Sub 2, actually. So Sub 2, like a lot of people, it's their first time being a part of a community. For me, the parkour community was my first time being a part of a community of people that wanted to see me grow, that wanted to pour into me, that wanted to help me elevate, that wanted to help me step my game up, that were much higher level than me, that were spending time with me as a brand new practitioner, just pouring hours and hours into me, giving me advice, inviting me out to events. Come do this, come do that. Dude, we're outside your house, jump in the car. All of this led to my growth. All of this led to me leveling up. And here's the funny thing. As I was leveling up, as I was getting better, and leveling up in the parkour space means, being able to hit bigger jumps, being able to scale buildings, being able to do different acrobatic flips. Like I didn't grow up. A lot of people think I have a gymnastics background from like growing up. I didn't get inverted and upside down for the first time in my life until I was 19 years old. So I wasn't a kid that grew up with a trampoline or like was doing flips in a pool. Like literally the first time my feet went above my head was at 19 years old, which in the world of gymnastics, like that's when your career is wrapping up, not starting. But these people were pouring into me. And what started to happen was I didn't realize that I was gaining skill at an accelerated rate because I was just acclimating to the warmth of the campfire I was standing around. And it wasn't until we started to go out into the world and go out into different communities and be a part of different circles and campfires that people were coming up to me and saying, "Whoa, you can do what? How long have you been doing this? Oh my gosh, you've only been doing this for 6 months, for a year." And I'm like, "Yeah, is that weird? Am I bad? Like, am I doing something wrong?" "No, you're actually really good. I would have thought you were doing this for 4 years, 5 years." And I was like, "Whoa, this is absolutely insane. This is bonkers." Right. And I really got to see the power of the campfire effect. So as an athlete, what that led to was it led to me later performing in competitions, just purely out of just fun and just wanting to see what my skill levels were, right? Just seeing how I stacked up. This led to me doing performances for different like venues and things of that nature in the city, in Manhattan, because I lived in there and there was a big stunt crowd and like a performance crowd. And then it also led to me running there's a place called Woodward. Any of my action sports homies know about Camp Woodward, which is like the extreme sports freaking mecca in the United States. Like anybody that's ever been on a BMX bike, skateboarding, scooter, cheerleading, parkour, dirt bike, any of that stuff knows about Woodward. It was absolutely on your wish list. As I leveled up and became more and more of a leader in the community, I actually became the director of the parkour program at Camp Woodward, where I've coached over 1,000 students, and just got to meet and befriend all of my favorite pro athletes that were international, because I had the privilege of being able to fly them into the States, into the US, to come and be at Woodward with me in the summer for a month.
So, okay, I love that you said this, right? I freaking love this conversation. It's an amazing one. And it's me because like I grew up as a skater when I was going through that. It was definitely a little bit more of a phase, but I went through that. And everything you're talking about, right? Just the repetitions of making, the repetitions of growth and self-practice and community. What you had in parkour, that community that you had, I had that in skating. So we had our own little skate crew, right? But one thing I want to talk about, and I need to make sure I hear you talk about is because I know I'm very familiar with parkour, but because I'm obsessed with stunt culture, and stunt culture, especially in Hollywood, because a lot of Hollywood stunt performers get their starts as either martial artists or a lot of times parkour athletes when they're a little bit younger. And it's usually hand in hand. I want to know, did parkour teach you anything about fear?
Well, such a good question. So, yes, the short answer is absolutely. In parkour, one of my favorite things to do, right, was what we would call descents, right? So, if you've ever seen a guy on the outside of a parking lot structure who's just like scaling down the outside, just like dropping from level to level, hanging on the edge and just dropping level to level, just coming down 6, 7 stories on the outside of it, no harness, nothing but like his sneakers and bare hands. That was one of my favorite things in the world to do. And here's why. People looked at it and they thought, "Holy crap, this dude's an adrenaline junkie. He just like has a death wish, like one wrong move and kaputs, you're done." And in their defense, they're absolutely right. At 7 stories up, your hands slip, a bird slaps you in the face, a 200-mile-per-hour gust of wind appears out of nowhere. And yes, like it all ends. However, what I loved about it was this. The actual motion, the movement to go from level to level was a very basic movement. It was hang on the wall, get your feet in front of you, push your hips away, and then as your hips start to swing back in, you release from the wall, allowing your feet to drop. Your feet come in, your hips are back in alignment, they're falling towards the wall, and your hands can very easily reach back in to grab the next level. And you're dropping from maybe about 4 or 5 feet. So everything is very simple when you bring it to the ground level. And most people, if you ask them to do this motion at the ground level where there is no fall and there is no danger, well, 9 out of 10 people will be able to do this. In fact, I'll probably say 9 out of 9 people would be able to do this motion. So the motion itself, extremely easy, extremely manageable by the average person. Now you add this layer of height. The actual motion in and of itself does not change at all, but the height adds a mental factor. And that's all it is. It's a mental factor. So this is why it became my favorite thing in the world to do, because for me, it wasn't training my body physically anymore. It was actually a mental training center. It was something that sucked my attention so much so, and it brought me into the present moment where there was literally not a single thing else that mattered. All that mattered was staying focused on the drop. All that mattered was staying focused on making sure my feet landed where I was looking, that my hands reached back in and grabbed the edge of the wall so that there was no slipping back. So what I learned was, first off, I was very, very well aware of the risk. Extremely well aware. You can't tell me that standing on the edge of a building isn't risky, right? Like when people say, don't you understand what's, I'm like, of course, I have eyeballs, right? I can sense that there's a drop to the side of me that if I fell off, I would, seriously hurt myself, if not die. Very well aware of that. However, it taught me risk management. And that's what I want people to understand. It's not about risk avoidance, because that's a recipe for failure. Trying to avoid risk is a really weird way to live, in my personal opinion, because it can't be avoided. Life by nature is risky, right? By nature, nobody makes it out alive. Right? It's just statistics, right? No one has made it out alive yet. Therefore, life is risky. Life ends in death. So it's not about trying to avoid it. It's more so about learning how to manage the risk, right? We want to avoid death, but we want to manage the risk. So within parkour, one thing I had to learn how to do was assess something that was very natural to us as humans. Sam, let me ask you this question. When you're afraid, do you know what happens to your body?
No.
Okay. How about you, Logan? And just like it doesn't have to be like super scientific, but like when you're afraid, like
you kind of go into like fight or flight, basically.
Right. So our palms get sweaty, pupils dilate, our heart rate begins to elevate. Right, this is a physiological response that kicks in with our body when we're nervous and when we're afraid. Do you know what happens when you're excited? Palms get sweaty, pupils dilate, heart rate begins to elevate. So we have one physiological response for two totally different emotions, right? One is I'm afraid and one is I'm excited. So we need to be able to understand, well, what's the difference? Because some people think they're interchangeable. They are not interchangeable. And in parkour, being able to recognize the difference really was the difference between life or death with some of the things that I was doing. So I had to have a checklist, because here's the interesting thing. When I'm able to differentiate between being afraid and being excited, I realize my body is being afraid for a particular reason. It's telling me that what I'm about to do is dangerous, right? Contrary to a lot of popular belief, I don't like danger. I want to be safe. I want to go and train, and I want to show up the next day to train again and to have fun and move my body. So when I'm afraid, my body is trying to give me a warning signal that, hey, we should not be doing this. Vice versa, when I'm excited, my body is simply telling me, hey, this is something we haven't done yet, but let's do it. Like, actually, I want to go see what's on the other side of this experience. So in parkour, I had to learn how to differentiate, and I did so by asking myself these 4 questions, right? And these are still the same 4 questions, funny enough, that I use now for real estate deals, that I use for figuring out if I'm going to partner with someone, that I use for figuring out, am I going to make a major life decision? Same principles, and I learned these all in parkour. So here are the questions I asked myself. Number 1, I asked myself, simple, do you want to do this? I think a lot of people don't actually check in with themselves, Sam, when they're about to do something major in life, right? Do I actually want to do this? And when I say that, I'm really taking a moment to realize, okay, am I doing this because my friends are standing behind me and they're cheering me on and they're hyping me up and they're getting me excited and I just chugged a Red Bull or I had some pre-workout or whatever the case may be, right? Something has me in a stimulated, elevated state of mind, right? Or do I actually want this for my own personal reasons, right? Like if I took away all the noise and I took away everything right now, like not saying there's anything wrong with the crowd or having a Red Bull or any of that stuff, having a cup of coffee, right? I just want to know, do I actually want this for me? So I had to ask myself that question. And I'm either giving myself a check, yes, I want it, or X, I don't want this. So if I get the check, I move into the next question. Regardless, I move into the next question. So after I ask myself, do I really want this? I then start to ask myself, have I prepared for this? Right? So have I done something similar to this? If the answer is like, bro, you've never done anything like this, like, and you're just trying to send it right now for no reason, like you've never even scaled down a ladder, and now you're trying to climb down the outside of a parking lot structure, then I'm going to say, well, you know what? I've never done anything like this. Right? So this is a signal. Or it's like, hey, you know what? You've actually practiced this motion inside of the gym. You practiced the motion over there on another wall that was very similar. You warmed it up. You've actually done a motion like this, just not this particular wall, not this particular deal, not this particular event, but you've done something like it before. So I move into the next question, which is, how am I feeling today? Right? I actually want to check in with myself and figure out, especially because it was something physical, right? How's my body feeling, right? Do my knees hurt? Do my arms hurt? Am I getting a feeling in my gut right now? Right? Like a feeling that's not normally there? Right? Do I have like a lump in the back of my throat? Do I have a headache? Actually just checking in. Hey, maybe the timing is off. Maybe today's not the right day. Right? I want to figure that out immediately. And then the final thing I like to ask myself is, does it matter? Like, do I actually need this? Do I actually does it matter? Like if I get this and I'm on the other side, will it change anything for me? Right? Will it give me a boost of confidence? Will it give me notoriety? Whatever it is. After I ask myself these 4 questions, if the answers are coming back as no, right? No, I'm not prepared for this. No, right now my friends are just hyping me up, right? And these things are telling me these negative signals, this negative feedback. What's happening is my body is communicating to me that I'm afraid. And being afraid is a good thing. Being afraid preserves your life in some cases when we learn how to actually interpret it properly. What it says is you need to go prepare more, right? You need to sit down with yourself and figure something out. There's a missing piece because I view my body and I view my life experience as a partnership, right? I don't just force the body to do whatever it is. I can tell it what to do, right? But I tell it what to do when it gives me the sign, when it cosigns with excitement. Because excitement is now saying hey, although we've never done this experience, right? I've had this before, speaking on stage, right? I've had this where I've said, you know what, I've never spoken on stage before like this, but I did one time give a presentation at school, and I did one time get on a podcast, and I did. So I'm able to say, okay, I've done something like this, but I haven't done this. Do I want this for them or do I want this for me? You know what? I want this for me. I want this for my own confidence. Okay, how do I feel today? Well, you know what? I'm well rested. I ate a meal. I'm feeling a little bit excited. The palms are sweaty, but I know that's excitement. I'm not afraid. Therefore, do the thing. Send it. In Parkour, we would just say send it. So at that moment, I would send it. That is the same thing I do with real estate now. I do the same thing with deals when I'm not sure. It's hey, this is my first time doing a deal. Hey, this is my first time. The first time you borrow $10,000, now you want to borrow $100,000. Now you want to borrow close to $1 million. Well, have I done something like this before? It's the same process. So I learned that heavily in Parkour. And those are the actual questions that I go through with myself mentally before I make a major decision and move forward.
Oh man, there's so much there. There's so much there, and this was taking me back to pro athletes, right, who are trying to set world records, they do very similar things, right? Because when you're trying to set, like, let's just say you're whatever the sport is, whatever the activity is, when you are about to, especially in parkour, you're performing. You are physically performing. A lot of times what people don't realize is as athletes, your mind is probably it's mindset first. It's mind first, and the body will follow what the mind says. And those audits, right? What you're basically, that checklist, those 4 questions that you ask yourself, is you are just auditing whether your mind is in alignment with your body. And when people go for world records, they do the exact same thing because they only have one chance to do it. I mean, they'll get another chance a month later, but it has to be primed and ready for that one moment. And if things aren't in alignment, then it goes back to, are you willing to take this risk right now and not be in an optimal state to do it? And the fact that you're applying it now to business, to your entrepreneurial endeavors, is just, it's an amazing thing. And it's showcasing to me that you had this ability, this self-awareness at a young age. You had this in school where you were asking yourself these pointed questions. As closers, we call them pointed questions that will actually give you grand clarity in the matter that you're trying to dissect. And then you did it when you were skating, and you had that community and you were trying to get better. And then you brought it with you in parkour. And I'm sure as you're getting older, you're getting better at asking yourself the right pointed questions. And now you're applying it to business. I'm stealing this. I wrote this down. I wrote those 4 down. I'm stealing them. So thank you.
Yeah, no, dude, 100%, man. And you said something really interesting, which is, I want to shed light on what you just said, right? As we're getting older, as we evolve, I'm not even gonna say getting older, just as we evolve, as we level up in this game, right? The game of life. Being able to ask ourselves the right questions, being able to ask the right questions of life, of people, of ourselves, is actually one of the cheat codes I find to progression, right? Our lives are, in direct correlation to the level of questions that we can ask of others and of ourselves. So I would encourage people to utilize questions and leverage questions on yourself to actually move forward, to actually get yourself to that next level in any endeavor. And in alignment with what you said, as far as the thoughts and the body being in alignment, something that correlated as well from parkour that moved into the world of business and into everything else is this ability to actually visualize the end and desired result. That played a major role. That started in parkour for me, and it's in skateboarding as well. And it's the same thing again, moving into business. It's being able to see the end result. Not necessarily being able to see all the stuff in the middle, but actually that would be another thing anytime I would do like a roof jump or a roof gap, Sam, I would only do it if it was something that it was a height or a distance that I'm really like, hey, I actually don't know. This is now getting closer to my outer bounds of comfortability of hey, I know I'm pushing my own limit right now. Physically, mentally, I'm at the edge. And my body isn't giving me a very clear don't go. And it's also not giving me a very clear go. So then I would fall into the last ditch resort of kind of pull the last trick out the bag, which was, can I see myself on the other side safely? Can I see this working out? And get this now. Here we go. This is actually, I want to talk about this because I don't hear a lot of people talk about this often. Sometimes I would try to visualize myself on the other side safely. And do you know what I would see? I would actually envision and see myself falling to my death. I would actually see myself missing the edge, not quite clearing, my foot slipping on the takeoff, there being sand or dust or dirt or something happening. And I would actually see myself falling. And in the beginning, when this started to happen, I used to freak out, guys. Logan, I would get shook. And then I was just all right, don't think about it. Don't think about it. And you ever heard what resists persist? You ever heard that saying before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So there's this saying that essentially anything you resist, persist. So when I kept telling myself, don't see yourself falling, don't see yourself falling, like just don't think about that. The more I tried to not think about it, the more it would start to like lurk and feel bigger in the shadow. And then what would start to happen was now, like as I'm getting ready to go, like as I'm running up to the edge, it flashed through my mind at the last second, which was even more dangerous. That's the equivalent of you trying to do something and you're balancing and you're really focused, and someone drives by and shouts, "Sam, don't do it!" Like last thing you want to hear. Last thing, you don't want something just like snapping and grabbing your attention in the last moment. So what I learned to do, and I'm really grateful for this, was I actually was taught from experience to live into the vision of it, the worst case scenario. I would actually imagine the worst case scenario. I would imagine myself purposefully failing, purposefully missing the landing, purposefully, going down. And I would start to work through, well, if that did happen, how would you recover? What would you do? Would you just give up in the air and just let your body fall to its death? Well, no, maybe I would turn and I'd grab it. And by actually working through the worst case scenario and actually leaning into that scenario where a lot of people shied away, a lot of people are just like, no, like I don't even want to process that. I don't even want to, I would go into it and say, well, can I solve that problem? Can I create a solution in that world? And that in and of itself would actually make it all go away. So again, same thing I do with the real estate deals now. Because I think a lot of people had this in the beginning when they're looking at a real estate deal and they're asking, man, but what happens if it goes wrong? What happens if you can't make the monthly payment? What happens if the tenant blows up? What happens if your contractor walks away? Cool. What happens? Yeah, tell me what happens. Imagine it. Let's go there. Let's imagine it.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, how would you fix it? How would you solve it? And actually, how likely is it to really happen now that you've thought about it in such detail? All right, so now what do you want to actually have happen? And come back to that place of neutrality, and then the vision would come. So that's a technique I still use today for basically everything that's a challenge to me.
We're so blessed that we have you and Sam on here. You guys are both high-level athletes, and you guys think differently than most people do. And what you said right there, I think is so powerful, is just accepting, like, and actually taking in and experiencing, like, what is worst case scenario? What does it actually look like if I miss this opportunity? And when you were talking about parkour and athletics, like there is real physical danger that's involved in those elements. As we move over to business, if we're able to actually take that critical thinking that you just did right there, like, what are some of the actual worst case scenarios? And a lot of that comes down to, like, your pride gets hurt. That's actually it, right? Like, or maybe we lose a little bit of money. But ultimately, a lot of it just comes down to just our pride and our fear of just like looking silly, not knowing the answers. And like, if we actually put ourselves in what you just said right there, we take a actual real life application and like start to critically think about, okay, what happens if a seller hangs up on me? What happens if a seller tells me no? Like, am I still going to be able to go home and kiss my wife, kiss my kids? Am I still going to be able to pay my bills? Am I still going to be able to eat my Cheerios? Am I still going to get my birthday? Right? Am I still going to get laid? Right. And so all those things are still going to be able to happen, even if you have a seller tell you no, or even if you have a shortcoming in whatever your business is. And a lot of times it's just like doing what Marlon said right there, is actually experiencing and taking it in, and then actually being able to critically think of like, okay, what if this does happen? Then what am I going to do? What sort of solution can you then come up with once a seller does say no? What happens if you do lose money? Then what? Right. Mm-hmm. And then you're able to actually critically think. And actually all that is called preparation. Right. You're just preparing yourself.
No, it's huge, right? It's exactly what you said. It's preparation, and it's learning. Honestly, our worst case scenario. I'll explain this, right? Like I'll use an example, right? When I was taking on my first flip, right? The worst case scenario that I was so concerned about, I was so scared about, was, hey, like, what happens if like we just lose a whole bunch of money? The contractor comes in, like, the job costs way too much. Like, we have no clue what we're doing. We get totally taken advantage of. I'm virtual. Like, it just, every sort of what if came into play, right? And then ultimately, like, when I started to boil it all down, I started to realize, like, well, what's the worst case scenario? Like, all right, let's say the flip goes absolutely terrible. Let's say I lose $20,000. Let's say I lose 50. Let's say I lose $100,000. Right? A lot of freaking money. Right? So I lose all that money. Now what? Well, okay, I'll just go back to the job I would have gotten. I'd eventually earn that money back, and I'd eventually pay off my debts and come right with everything. But then what's so scary about that? I'm like, well, it's not the money, I guess. It's this, oh my gosh, like I guess people looking at me like I'm a total doofus. Like that was like
Yeah.
the big scare. That was, oh my gosh, like I'm nervous about people looking at me like I'm stupid. I'm nervous of people looking at me like I'm an idiot. Well, do I think I'm an idiot? I don't think so. I think personally being able to actually be brave enough to put yourself out there, be brave enough to take the shot, be brave enough to actually do the thing. To me, that's worth it. Like that is in essence life, right? You're granted this opportunity to go out and create and to go do. And sitting on the sideline is one way to live life. Not my favorite way. I don't necessarily vote that way, but getting up and actually being brave enough to get on the court. And I had spent so much time not getting on the court, Logan, that I made up my mind a while ago, some time ago, that that's just not how my life will be lived. And
Yeah.
if anyone chooses to live that way, I got everyone chooses what works for them. I couldn't live with the pain of regret. Right. And there's an exercise I do. Like I said, I'm very future oriented. Like my brain lives in the future. Like I'm present and future oriented all the time. And exercise I recommend for everybody to do, and I really do recommend you do this, is imagine yourself on your deathbed, right? And imagine yourself reflecting backwards on life. And you're looking at the decisions you're making and the decisions you're getting ready to make right now. And you're asking yourself, do you regret doing what you're about to do? And not like you're about to do something negative, because I think a lot of people think of it as like a negative, but it's like, hey, do you regret not going after your dream? Do you regret being in your 20s or being in your 30s or being in your 40s and not actually chasing after it? Not actually even putting forth the attempt? Because for me, like every time I think about that, like I can feel it so clearly. Like it's visceral. Like my body reacts to it. It doesn't like that feeling. And I'm like, whoa, I do not want that future to happen. So I make the decisions to get out there, to put myself out there. And I trust in my ability to problem solve and figure things out in real time.
It's amazing. I think that's like one of the reasons that we all get along right here is because we're all willing to go broke investing in ourselves, right? We're willing to go broke in experiences. We're willing to go broke for knowledge, for skills. We're willing to go broke for relationships, and we're willing to go broke for real estate, right? And at the end of the day, I think there's something really powerful because people are so afraid. They're so afraid to actually put themselves out there in a situation that could go either way. But what are you really risking, right? And what you're risking is that like none of those things will actually happen to you. Like you never have amazing skill sets because you're not willing to put yourself in a situation to get those skill sets. You'll never have an amazing relationship because you're not willing to put yourself out there. You'll never have an amazing experience because you're not willing to like, oh, this could go either way. And going back to the last thing I said with about real estate, like people are afraid to buy freaking real estate, right? Like maybe one of the safest freaking investments you can actually make. It's shown to be consistent over the course of the last over 100 years. Like people are afraid to do that. So as we kind of make that transition now and talking about real estate, you've hinted about it a couple of times. Now we're making the transition from parkour into real estate. Tell us a little bit about what that transition was like and honestly kind of what your business looks like now.
Yeah, no, great question. So essentially I started to make the transition from parkour to real estate because I found myself in an area of my life. So this is where who's ever listening to this right now, you're about to get to know like Marlon, like probably deeper than you need to know him. When I was about 24 years old, I'd been doing parkour now for a handful of years, been absolutely loving it. Like it's just a total sport of passion, absolutely sport of passion. And like I said, over 1,000 students. You guys know me well enough to know that when I talk to people, I like to go deep. Like, forgive me if you're ever looking for a surface level conversation. It's just not going to happen. This is what you get. If you like it, great. If you don't, there's 7.8 billion other people. Go talk to one of them. So when I would talk with my students, even the young ones, like I would get kids 5, 6, 7 years old, and I would have a conversation with them. And hey, what do you want to do when you're older? Hey, what do you want to do with your life? And I don't think there's anything wrong with asking a kid that age. People are like, oh, they have no clue. I'm like, no, they have a clue. Just recognize that what they choose today doesn't necessarily need to define them for the rest of forever. So I'm just curious, like, hey, kid, what do you want to do? Right? And the answer I would get all the time, I want to be a parkour coach. I want to be a parkour athlete. And I was just like, oh, man, that's so cool. I'm totally ruining this kid because I live in New York, guys. Like, do you know how expensive it is to live in New York and how little as a coach and athlete in parkour you make? I mean, like,
you're just thinking to yourself, man, oh, this kid's gonna be broke because of me. Oh man.
Bro, I'm literally like thinking, like, what am I leading this kid into? Like, oh my gosh, like, bro, you'll have all the baggy sweatpants you ever want and the shoes with holes in them. And so as I started to realize, like, okay, well, why are they giving this answer? It's like, okay, they're clearly giving this answer because I'm influencing them. I'm spending a lot of time with them, right? They're just seeing how elated I am when I show up to work. I mean, it is just abundance of joy coming out of me because I was genuinely doing what I absolutely loved. And I wasn't even making that much. I actually was turning down jobs at other locations because I just really loved the community that, me and my best friends had built inside of our local facility. Like, it was just phenomenal. Guys, we had, like, I'm not saying this to brag at all. Like, we had the largest parkour program in the US. Like, we had over 250 registered students that were coming in like week after week, year after year. And then on like the non-registered, like people that would just like come in and drop in, we were getting probably like another 250 people each week that were just coming in from word of mouth who just weren't committed because they had other schedules. So like we were seeing a lot of people. Like, it got to the point where we were maxed out of the building space and we're like, yo, we need to go get a bigger facility for this internet sport that no one ever heard of. But people kept coming back because the vibration, like we were just 4 guys freaking loving life, crushing it, having fun, and ton of joy. So of course we're influencing the kids who now want to grow up to be like us and get paid, $15 an hour. And this started my journey of saying, like, okay, I need to go and actually become more, right? I need to actually go figure out this thing called finances, right? I need to go figure out how to earn more because right now these kids want this part of my life. They want the joy, but they don't also recognize that I'm getting a little bit older and I'm starting to actually have desires for the first time of wanting to start a family, of wanting to be able to build and wanting to be able to travel and provide for other people. And this wasn't there before. This wasn't necessarily like a part of my mental upbringing, right? I didn't have desires of like, oh yeah, like one day I want to be a husband and be a father and go take care and build my community up and like be able to provide for them in that sort of way. And I'm realizing the skill set that I have with the industry I'm in isn't providing that opportunity. And I actually for a while tried to get my industry to want to actually blow up a little bit more, to want to make more money, because I started reading different books and becoming more and more entrepreneurial. And what I found was I was finding a lot of resistance. I was finding a lot of resistance because there was a mindset that had existed in this community. It's the same mindset that kind of existed with skateboarders in the early days of, down with the man, and, money is the root of all evil. That was a big one. So I was fighting against my own community that I loved, and I was trying to change them. And I don't know about you guys, but have you ever been in a relationship where you try to change the other person, or at least you've seen somebody in a relationship where they try to change the other people? Those relationships typically don't work out well.
It's the worst.
It's the absolute. It's if you want a crash course in frustration, go and try and change somebody else. So I recognized I couldn't change the community, but I still can influence those kids, right? So that actually led me to saying to myself, like, okay, Marlon, you need to go become more. You need to go make more of yourself. You got to start, like, go find something that you can go and learn how to earn money. And at the same time, you need to be able to fulfill your passion of providing value and helping people and watching people progress and growing people. It was a non-negotiable for me. I could not take one without the other. an absolute non-negotiable. So I started my search, and I'll tell you, like, real estate was not the first thing I found. I found like a few other endeavors, as many entrepreneurs have, where we tried a little bit of this, tried a little bit of that, tried stock trading. I actually opened up and ran like a t-shirt company, did different things. Everything
Nice.
was mildly successful, but I never created a system, right? So I was always like in the self-employed loop, but learning lessons each time, with each iteration, with each rebirth, learning a lesson, learning a lesson,
And
learning a lesson.
so what was the thing that got you your first foot into real estate? Was it someone that you looked up to? Was it YouTube? Was it a mentorship? Was it a friend? Like what kind of led that to get you your first foot in the door?
Yeah. Shout out to Max Maxwell. I saw a YouTube video, man. YouTube freaking is
Nice.
a game changer. Like, if people aren't using YouTube, that's like free college education. Like, I don't know what the hell they're doing on the internet. They're watching one too many cat videos. So YouTube, somehow Max Maxwell came across my feed. Dude's talking about like wholesaling. I don't quite understand what I'm looking at, to be honest. Like, I started watching it, didn't quite click, but it was enough of a catalyst to, drop some nuggets in my ear. And at the time I was dating someone, and she said, I told her about it. I was like, hey, look, there's this guy, and he's saying like we can do real estate, and like we don't even need to be able to buy the properties. And she's like, yeah, but like you can't trust people on YouTube. Like, do you even know this guy?
Marlon?
Yeah, it's the internet. Like if we're gonna learn, like let's learn from somebody official. So one of those Robert Kiyosaki seminars, like Robert Kiyosaki's coming to town, right? Like, you ever see that, like when Robert Kiyosaki's coming to the Marriott near you, and like tickets are free, right? Robert Kiyosaki's throwing a free workshop.
I swear to God, I'm the only one in this space who's never been to one of these infamous free Robert Kiyosaki seminars. Like, I feel like I'm missing out on like a rite of passage.
You are missing out.
Yeah,
you gotta go through the process.
You're missing out on like losing some money. No, it's funny though. Like, it was so interesting actually. Like, it was one of those Robert Kiyosaki things come to town. It's free tickets, so I go out. Like, me and her go to it. She's like, well, let's go learn from them. Like, they're official. They're at least a vetted company. Let's go learn from them. Okay, cool. I sit down in the room. I'm never gonna forget it. This dude, James freaking Smith, freaking legend. This guy, for about 3 hours, almost 4 hours, standing in the front of a room with like maybe me and like 20 other like New Yorkers, just going like mind blowing, just dropping information like how you can do this with a house, how you can do that, how you can help a person. And like at the same time, like this dude just super raunchy, like calling people like snowflakes, like stop being a fucking snowflake, was cursing at us, but at the same time, like giving us information. And I'm like, I don't know how to feel. Like, is he yelling at me? Is he trying to help me? Like, I don't know what's going on, but my BS radar is like trying to sniff out like the part where he's lying to me. It never went off. So now, like after like 3-4 hours, I'm like, yo, this dude, like he's a little aggressive, but he didn't lie to me. He's actually, why don't I know what he's talking about? Like, why the hell don't I understand what he's talking about? Like, I can follow him, but I never learned this. So from there, it went to a 3-day class, right? Like paid to go into a 3-day class. I was like, I need to learn more about this. And I go to one of those 3-day classes, and same thing. Like, at the end of 3 days, I'm just like, holy crap. Real estate is the vehicle. Like, it makes so much freaking sense. Like, there's no way you can understand this and then not go and apply what you just learned. If you think you know real estate and you're not doing it, I can tell you don't know real estate. I can just tell you that. Like, there's no way you understand the power of real estate and then you're not actively applying it into your life in some way, shape, or form. It just wouldn't make any sense unless you're just like totally like, hey, like my life mission is to have nothing. In which case, oh, cool. I didn't realize that's what you were going for. I get it. So
for all you noobs out there, like Sam and Justin here, who've never been to a Rich Dad Poor Dad seminar before, the way it's structured is that the very first one is free, and you show up, and just like Marlon said, they really do drop some amazing bombs, and they say, hey, you can sign up for this weekend seminar. It's like 3 days, and it's like $400 or $500, and you get to bring a friend, right? Like that's like their key things. You can bring a friend with you, so it becomes like $200, $250 a piece. That everyone who's actually a little bit into real estate always signs up for that, because it just like the amount of value is just like, it's totally worth it. By the way, you should all do it.
Insane.
And then you go to this 3-day seminar, which is on a different weekend, and that's where they drop you even more bombs, and they have 3 days to basically sell you on a big coaching program, a little bit more than $500, like $25,000. So my question is to you, Marlon. You obviously got pitched, so tell me like kind of your experience, if you went through with it, if you didn't go through with it, and kind of your decision making process either way.
Bro, okay, so get this, guys, because yeah, I mean, it was a sales pitch. As much as it was like education, it was also a sales pitch, right? Where you learn this on the opposite side. You learn this after you get into sales. And my experience with it was actually the entire time I'm there, the 3 days, I'm like, wow, I'm really beginning to see the light. And by the time I get to the second day, I'm just like, I'm feeling all types of way. Like I'm feeling all sorts of emotion because I know that this is one of those moments, right? We all can know when we're in the middle of experiencing like a critical life moment, right? Like a life-turning moment where it's like, hey, you need to either leap or spend the rest of your life being a little punk standing on this cliff. Right? It's like, yo, you're like, I'm like, that's kind of like how it is. Like, I wish there was like, and I'm trying my best to like not say what I'm really thinking because I don't know how I'm allowed to curse on here, but essentially,
Full send always, Marlon.
Full
yo,
send.
like, you're either gonna like, yo, seriously, like, you're either gonna full send it or you're gonna be a little bitch. You're gonna stand there and like not take the move because we say we want things in life, but then we don't actually do anything about it. And that, like, straight up, if that's who you are as a person, like, and you feel some type of way about me saying this, you feel like I'm attacking you personally, I am. And I want you to get upset. I want you to be upset because that's showing me that you actually can feel something. So if you feel angry right now, understand that you feel angry because you haven't decided to choose yourself. You haven't decided to bet on yourself. You don't even believe in yourself, and yet you want other people to believe in you. So I'm having this moment, I'm having this experience inside the room, and this is the first that's being brought up to me, and I'm grateful because I'm like, damn, these strangers respect me enough to make me confront my own self, to make me see my own self, and have to ask myself a serious question of like, yo, are you going to bet on yourself? Do you believe in yourself? Because clearly, after everything they just showed me, clearly this works. The formula works. It all makes common sense. It all makes logical sense. But do I believe it's going to work for me? Do I believe that I work? Do I believe that I'm worth the investment? And to answer your question, Logan, yeah, I bought. Like, I actually went in.
Nice.
And here's like the crazy thing, because I know people that have done it said like, oh man, it was a ripoff. They're like, but like whatever, they didn't get results. And I have the same thing to say to all of them. Like, you didn't get results because you didn't do the work.
No.
Because when you pay for a high ticket item, what they're really asking, they're not asking you for your money. I know some people would say, like, you go online, you could read the reviews, you could talk to people who like were in this program but didn't succeed, and they'll say, man, but like they just take your money and then like this and that, and they have every excuse in the world. Listen, when people charge you for something, and it took me a while to understand this, the reason they don't give it for free is, one, they need you to invest in yourself. I learned that when people charge me, they're not actually taking my money away from me. What they're doing is they're taking the value of my money and they're forcing me to turn around and inject it into myself. No. Because I clearly value money. We all do. We use money as a store of value. So when we spend it on education, when we spend it on a course, when we spend it on an experience, we're actually absorbing that information, and then being able to utilize it is up to us. So I always give them credit where credit is due, because I've been a part of other mentorships in the afterwards that, have done amazing, amazing things. But they were the first to force me to make a decision to bet on myself and to make me burn the boats. Yeah. Because when I made that decision, I decided I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how stupid I look. I don't care what anybody in my life thinks, what my family thinks. I do not care. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to make this work, or I will die trying. And in that case, I have no problems to worry about anyway.
Yeah. It's so, like, what you said right there is so powerful. And it's funny because I love asking this question, because a lot of people have been to these seminars, and we've had people on here who have been very similar in your situation, who have done it, had success. We've actually had people on here who have done it and didn't have success with it. And ultimately what you said actually is the most powerful thing you can say, is like, you were going to make it happen regardless. So it wasn't actually up to Rich Dad. It wasn't up to Kiyosaki. It wasn't up to your coach. It wasn't up to anybody else around you. It was up to you to actually be successful. And I think if everyone took that true accountability and said, it's not about pace. It's not about Kiyosaki. It's not about Cody Sperber, whatever mastermind that you're in, and it's just about you, and then you're going to figure it out. Like you'll be successful. And here's the funny part is that just because you didn't have success right from the beginning, like if you actually just kept pushing, maybe you didn't have the skill sets, maybe you didn't have the mindset, maybe there was something missing in your life where you were distracted at that moment. But if you just kept in the game long enough, like, do you think you'd eventually be successful if you actually just kept on knocking at the door?
Bro, so that right there is like the skateboarding coming back around, because that was the lesson I learned in skateboarding. Like if you just keep at it, eventually you figure it out. It took me 6 months to learn how to ollie and do a pop shove it. Right. It took me 8 months to get my first deal in real estate. And this was both skateboarding and real estate. I was going at it every single day, and I was genuinely going at it, genuinely putting it on. Like, sometimes like people go at it, and they're just, a body in the chair. Right. Like my heart was in there. Like I was.
Does this mean sex? What does that mean?
It means like, bro, let's go. So it's like, because sometimes like people say like, yeah, I've been working so hard at it. And we've all been, at least I can't speak for everyone. I've been there, right? Like where it's like, I'm working like, and I'm on Instagram, I'm scrolling, like I'm not really working, and I'm not putting my all in, right? But then there are things that like when I know I'm putting my all in, right? And with real estate, I was putting my all in. I was doing what they said. They gave me an assignment. I was doing the assignment. Why was I doing the assignment? Because I just paid $4,000 for this assignment. Yeah. I'm doing the stupid assignment, right? You said call people. I'm calling every people I know.
So tell us about that. So you said it took you 8 months. Was that 8 months from the time you signed up from that seminar that you got your first deal?
Yep. So 8 months from the time I signed up for that seminar until I had my first deal close, got a check from it and had proof of concept.
How much money did you make from that first deal?
Bro, life-changing money. Like life-changing. $4,000.
Perfect. That's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah. And honestly, I joke, but truly it was life-changing money, because for
the proof of concept is what you just said, right? You got the proof of concept.
It was proof of concept. And it was also, truth be told, it was the biggest single check I had ever made doing anything, right? Like everything else had always been like checks accumulated over time, but that was like the single like largest check, right? Like even as like a athlete in parkour, right? Like our competitions didn't pay anything, right? So it's like, I really had never seen a check for more than maybe like $800.
And then how long did it take for you to get your next deal after that first one?
Oh, that was beautiful. I think maybe another 4 months after that first deal. Right, so there was like this lag time. Right, yeah, so it took me half the time, right? And I was grateful because all that time that it took me to get the first deal taught me persistence, taught me showing up, taught me continuing and sticking with it. And so much so that as I started to get more momentum, right, since then, I've been fortunate enough to do, I don't know, somewhere around like 20 like wholesale transactions. I own 17 doors now between 10 houses. I've completed and sold 3 flips, with another 3 currently being sold right now. One we just accepted an offer on last week, which is officially my first triple-digit flip, which is like super stellar, because like those don't happen often in my market at all. And I've got like wholesale, I got like rap deals and creative deals happening like across the US right now, which is just insane, because in the very beginning, during those moments of nothing happening, I was wondering, man, like, did I make a mistake? Am I an idiot? Did I just spend all this money on like nothing? Is it actually going to work? I know it works for everyone else. Is it going to work for me? Like crap, like, and all that stuff kept coming up, but I didn't stop. I refused to stop because I had made up. Again, and I got to give them credit where credit's due. They made me burn the ship. Right when I invested that money, I truly had to, for one of the first times in my life, make a decision that I couldn't wiggle my way out of because it got uncomfortable. Because that was an uncomfortable amount of money for me to lose. That was a very uncomfortable, because I didn't have that money to lose. I financed that money on credit cards. That money wasn't mine to lose.
In that moment, you showed your commitment to yourself, right? Like you weren't sure if it was going to work, but you believed in yourself, and you decided that you were going to force that commitment by putting your dollars in front of your mouth, right? And one of my favorite mentors, named Dr. Trevor Cashy, he once said it like this that really helped me out. And I come from the weight loss industry, and so you definitely have to force people to take action. Otherwise, it's real easy. All those excuses, like they're really prevalent in the fitness industry. And the way he described it is that the transformation is in the transaction. And when you're able to actually take that and like actually have the belief in that as a fitness entrepreneur, or in this case from like Rich Dad Poor Dad, as someone who's facilitating a transformation as a change, when you understand that money, that exchange is someone's transformation, like that's their commitment to you. And at that point, now you have permission to just hold them accountable and tell them like it is and give them the X's and O's. You're truly doing one of the best things you can ever do on the highest level, is actually serve somebody by allowing them to pay for the service. And so going back to what you talked about earlier of like the reviews of the seminar, like there's like, it's not just Rich, there's so many other seminars out there. There's anything out there that people have to get convinced into buying, they get sold into. You're gonna have people who are not successful and they're gonna be like, oh, they hard sold me, all those other things. But ultimately, it always comes back to them and their commitment level, and whether they want to blame, they want to look externally, or whether they're going to take 100% responsibility and say, I'm going to figure this out. Like it's on me to actually be successful, whether it's successful right now or whether I'm successful in 8 months or in 1 year or 2 years. Like the accountability should always be on the individual.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it's something that I've learned to come to appreciate as I've gotten older, as I've had more experience. And I recognize now that sales truly is service, right? Being able to influence other individuals for their own betterment, for their own personal transformation. Because at the end of the day, we can't ever make somebody do something that they don't want to do, right? And I don't even want to try. Like that's just, I would never want someone to manipulate me to doing something. However, being influenced, I appreciate that people have influenced me, because my life has become immensely better because they've influenced me, because they taught me how to tap into more of myself, how to leverage and use more of myself, because they asked more of me than anyone else had ever asked before. And sometimes I think people are uncomfortable with that. But I know I've been very uncomfortable in the past with asking more of people. And I realize I'm asking more of them because I respect them to rise to the occasion.
Yeah. Dude, it's so amazing. That was one of the epiphanies that I just had last week, that Layla Hermosi, who's one of my other mentors, she said it in a tweet or an Instagram post. I don't know which one it was, but she said the greatest form of love is accountability. And like that to me was just like, oh, because for so long I didn't quite understand why. I held people to a higher standard, and I wanted people to be the best. And so I would hold them stand, like even like ask Sam, like, hey bro, like you gotta, like, you're on your stuff, like that doesn't count. Like you do more. And it's funny because he always gives me a lot of crap for when I first met my wife. Like I had her pay for training, right? She literally paid me money for training for a very long time. Actually, it wasn't just like one time, like it was for a long time. It was almost a year. And a lot of people don't understand that, but I truly believe that the greatest form of love is accountability. I was never able to express it in such an eloquent way that Layla did. But I realized that. And I think the reason why I like that is my calling now is because when I was a young man, a young kid, no one actually held me accountable. No one was actually there to say, Logan, like, quit being a dummy. Like, you can do better. Try harder, right? Like, no one was actually there pushing me. They were just like, Logan, you'll get them next time. They always like brushed off. They didn't, like, no one ever held me accountable. They just like let me slip through the cracks. And I wanted someone to like grab me by the shirt and say, Logan, you're better than this. Like, show up, do something, right? And no one ever gave me that. And so now looking back on that, it's like, I want to give that to you, Marlon. I want to give it to you, Sam. I want to give it to my wife, my kids. Like, I hold people accountable. And I want that because like that's my way of showing my love for them. And I see that a lot in you as well, that you want to hold people accountable. And it's something that is so powerful that we do as coaches is, you know what? You say you're going to do something. Well, I'm going to help you follow through with it, right? But ultimately, it's on you. It's not on me, but I'm going to do my best. Are you going to do your best?
Dude,
I gotta say this, real quick. For anyone that's watching, and you're, I don't know, whatever it is, it's like a mentorship or a community, or you're paying a trainer, whoever it is. The reality is this: is I've been very heavily influenced by mentors holding me accountable. And the reality is, when a mentor, like, actually, it takes effort to hold people accountable.
Yeah.
It takes emotional and mental effort for you to actually, because when you're accountable, you have to check in on them. You have to actually take an interest in their success. So if you're like a student, or you're like, in the position of about to be a student, and you're like brushed off, or you feel a little bit uneasy with a mentor challenging you with a big stake, and they're holding you accountable, just know that actually means that mentor actually gives a damn. And that's probably the best mentor for you, because ones who don't, they're just going to say, here's a price tag. That's it, whatever. Or they'll just be like, do you want to do it? No. Okay, whatever. Or they won't hold you to your own thing. This is what that Logan does. Anytime that like I get ahead of myself and I say something, just like kind of audacious, Logan actually makes me follow through on it. And he will literally check in on me to make sure I'm following through on it. And the reality is, he doesn't have to do that. If he actually didn't care, he wouldn't do it. The best mentors give enough of a damn about you to hold you accountable. It's the best thing in the world.
I think one of the, go on top of that, Sam, one of the most powerful things that we can do to ourselves is have integrity with what we say to ourselves and what we say out loud. And so when someone is out there holding us accountable, it helps us say, I said I really wanted to do real estate. And because I said it out loud, and I have someone holding me accountable, I'm actually going to follow through with it. It gives you more confidence in yourself, right? It gives you more confidence in yourself to do other things in your life. And I think that's why it's so powerful to have mentors, is because it actually, all it does is it helps you hold yourself more accountable, because you say you're going to do something, you actually follow through with it, you believe in yourself more. And so when you have an outside influence that you respect and is constantly checking in with you, it just helps you become a better person. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, that's why mentorship is so powerful. Right? It's really easy. It's really easy for us to give up on ourselves and just say, you know what, real estate really wasn't that cool. It's not really what I wanted to do anyway. And so that's why I didn't make my phone calls today. It's why I did invest in the courses, because it's just not that important to me right now.
It's so true, right? It's absolutely, absolutely, absolutely true. And I couldn't say it better myself, where having the mentorship, having the right people, and like I want people to understand, right? Because like as people are watching this, like my hope and my goal is, like, as people watch this and like they're having these sort of conversations, like they're part of this conversation with us, right? It's hopefully a conversation that you're having all the time, or if this is the first time you're having this conversation, hopefully we're providing brand new perspective, right? We're providing some new insight on something that maybe you'd been considering and you haven't done, right? You're like, you know what, maybe mentorship doesn't seem like the right thing, because the mentorship, the accountability that comes with it is unbelievable. And when people have these coaches and these coaching programs, and you ask someone, here's what's really interesting, right? Because you create a room, you create a space where you actually are saying like, hey, look, we're all pretty nice people, right? We don't want to like just go around and start like barking at people like, hey, lose weight, hey, get better, hey, become smarter, hey, become more financially stable, right? Because that would just be rude, right? There'd be no tact in that. However, when a person hands you some dollars and signs the paper and enters into your fight club, right, they could get into your dojo, they have now officially given you permission to like make me better. Just do whatever you gotta do, make me better. Oh. Okay, cool. Like now I can actually make you, it's uncomfortable. Growth is uncomfortable. Your real friends are going to call you out on that. The real mentors, the real coaches are going to call you out on that. Putting yourself in the right room, there's going to be a difference between the criticism that you get is going to be constructive criticism. It will be for the purpose of getting you where you want to go. And that is just so unbelievably valuable. And it takes a certain sort of individual to care about you enough, and it takes a certain sort of individual to be ready to invest in themselves, to be ready to go through that.
There's so much power in taking constructive feedback from somebody who you value their opinion, and maybe who you see as having something to give to you and some value, and someone who actually has the right intention of trying to grow you. Whereas someone who's giving you criticism or feedback where they're trying to actually hold you back and try to be a naysayer, or they're just trying to like, they see Marlon as maybe the Marlon when he was 19 years old in the parkour days, and now you're older, wiser, but they still see you maybe back in that days, and so like, oh, like that's not who you are, Marlon. Like you're not that way, right? Like you had maybe this negative quality back here, but you're like, no, that's not who I am anymore, right? And so I think there's really so much perspective in understanding whose feedback to take, and also like the naysayers and the haters and people who are just trying to hold you back. And a lot of those people are sometimes you who are closest to you, who are trying to hold you back because they're just protecting their version of you, and they don't want you to get hurt. But ultimately, as we talked about before, like by you staying exactly where you're at, like that's hurt. Like that's the life of what is going to be like the most scary thing is you on your deathbed being like, oh, I never took a chance. I never took that opportunity.
Logan, you just said something that I really just I would feel like I would be doing the world a disservice if we didn't just like quickly highlight this. You just mentioned something that a lot of people like. I know there are people watching this right now that are experiencing this challenge, and we're not going to let this slide by because they need to listen up. Right? In fact, if I were them, I'd like be stopping everything I'm doing. If I'm driving, I'd pull over for a second. You just said when they're around their old friends who expect them to be a certain way, right? And this is what happens as we start to grow, we start to make progress. And because we don't want to leave people behind, we will go back to people that knew us as the old us.
Yeah.
And we will find ourselves living into the identity that we created with them during that time of our lives. That identity was great for that moment in that season, but it no longer serves us. When we enter into these new rooms, we are given the ability to come in and take the mask off. Right? Like I want people to understand, like when you enter into these rooms, especially when you're talking about these paid rooms and mentorships and coaches, right? Like recognize like you're paying for the privilege to walk in, take off your mask and say like, here's the good, the bad, the ugly, here's who I am. I want worked on. Like you get to demand that, like make me better. You get to demand that, make me into who I want to be. You can actually demand that. However, when you go into these other rooms that you used to be a part of, that you feel obligated to, that you feel like you owe them still because you haven't given anything to that room. So now what you're giving them is you're pleasing them. You're giving into what they want, right? It's not even what you want anymore. Recognize that pattern. Don't even like beat yourself up for it. Just recognize the pattern if you've been doing it and then crush it. And then recognize when it starts to pop up again. Right? Recognize when you're living into a bad habit, into a bad routine, simply because of just honestly like being able to not recognize when you've created these identities for yourself that aren't serving you. And they're associated with people that in the past maybe haven't grown you, but again, take that extreme ownership. Right? Move on, put yourself
so valuable.
And create.
So by what you said right there is like being able to go into a new room, and this could be a physical room, or in this case, what we're talking about is like a virtual room of like a mastermind, and being able to like get rid of this old identity and say, you know what, I'm a blank slate, and here's what I want. Here's my experiences, and like help me basically, right? And it's so cool because I know that you run an amazing podcast, so. Into the Mind, like Marlon's interviewing some really amazing people, like Cody Barton, who we also had on last week, Steve Trang, which is freaking amazing, Bob Burg, the writer of the author of the Go-Giver, excuse me, like some just amazing high level people. And you also have like a little mini mastermind yourself, right? That you do every single morning. So Marlon, tell us a little bit about that and people, how they can kind of connect with you so they can learn more about you. And like, and you're an amazing interviewer, like way better than me and Sam, 1,000 times better. Well, maybe Sam's really good, but like way better than me for sure. But get to know you and kind of your personality. And then also if they want to have that next level where they want to create this new identity and they want like a safe place just to say, hey, I need some help. Like tell us a bit about how they connect with you.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I appreciate that. So first off, if anyone ever wants to connect with me, go to Instagram, type in @MindsetMarlon, right? One word, Mindset Marlon, Marlon. And that's the best way to get a hold of me. In my bio, there's a link to everything. There's a link to the podcast. There's a link to the YouTube page, all of it, right? Like come and just be a part of that campfire. Essentially, like I said, what I recognized when I was, getting started in entrepreneurship was entrepreneurship can get lonely, right? If you don't have the right community, like anything you do can get lonely if you don't have the right community. And also you can be hindering your own growth by trying to walk alone, right? There's that saying, by myself I can go fast, but together we can go far, right? And I recognized that when I was with people, I was able to go a lot further. The challenge was I couldn't find people when I was getting into this entrepreneurial journey. I couldn't find I found a mentorship, but the mentorship was Kiyosaki didn't provide a community at that time. So because it didn't have one, I created one. And I created it around not just teaching real estate. Honestly, like my mentor, it's not even a mentorship. My community is not about real estate. It's not about teaching the tricks and the tips because that's all there. What it is it's a room for individuals to come and actually be working on their personal development, be working on their mindset, be having the sort of conversations that actually change situations. Because oftentimes the environment we grew up in, we didn't get to explore the thoughts that are on the right side of the quadrant, on that growth mindset side. We didn't get to wrestle with those questions, get to wrestle with those thoughts, get to wrestle with those imagined scenarios. So now we actually get to come together and as a group every single day, Monday through Friday, we're having those conversations. We're having those higher level conversations where we're talking about our relationship to money, where we're talking about business principles, where we're talking about systems, where we're talking about personal development, where we're talking about understanding emotional intelligence, where we're talking about the difference between masculine and feminine energy, where we're actually bringing in guests that have been, I recently actually brought in like a few neuroscientists to come and talk to the community. And we're doing it early in the morning. This is my favorite part about this. Like some people think I'm a little crazy for this. We do these calls every day, Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. People are like, why the hell are you doing it at 7 a.m.? Because guys, this is 7 a.m. Eastern. I'm in Arizona. I'm waking up at like 3 to 3:30 in the morning so I can be on these calls to lead these calls at 4 a.m. in the morning, my time. Because here's what I learned and here's what I hated. I used to get inspired and educated and just like filled up with knowledge and good sauce like at night after work. So it's like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. I'm all like amped up and I'm ready to go. And then I got nobody to interact with. I got no one to like bounce ideas off. I got nobody to actually go and do the work with. Like I can't start calling people at midnight. Like they will frown upon that heavily. So I would always get upset that this would happen because the next morning when I wake up, I'm thinking like, all right, well, tomorrow's going to be so awesome. I'm going to be so ready to do what I just learned. And I would wake up the next morning and the fire was kind of gone. Maybe it's smoldering a little, but for the most part, it all just kind of vanished into the night, into the sleep. So I would think like, well, what if I did this in the morning? What if I got myself all excited and all jazzed up and I actually gave myself new perspective and got clarity every single morning on what it was I wanted to do. So I was pointed in the right direction. So instead of checking the map at the end of the day, I checked the map at the beginning of the day. What would life look like then? And would other people want to do that with me? Morning Mindset Coffee was born from that thought, like that rationalization. And it has been phenomenal. It's been so much fun. We have about 100 individuals in there. It's all grown pretty much through word of mouth. I haven't run like a lick of like any sort of advertisement. Besides just people like sharing stuff on Instagram and Facebook about their personal experience, about the transformations they've had and how it's been affecting and allowing them to grow not just their business, but themselves personally, professionally, and financially. So that's Morning Mindset Coffee. If you guys are interested in doing that or checking that out, go like right now. This is a sale right now. I'm selling you guys because I want you to invest in yourself, right? Go to morningmindsetcoffee.com right now. Click on the link. It's literally $1. I made it $1 for you to come in and try it out for a week. And if after that week you're like, this was a total waste of my time, cancel, right? You will get like an email. Like I don't try and keep you locked in there. Like I actually send you an email and a text message saying, hey, like your week is about to end. So if you want to cancel, jump out now. We have not had cancellations. People come in. And the coolest part is you're connecting with like-minded individuals, growth mindset individuals. And those sort of people are the people that become your business partners. Those are the sort of people I've raised private money inside my own Morning Mindset calls. right? Like these are the sort of people you do business with and you do life with. When we went to 10X Growth Conference, dude, we rolled out there like 11 people deep, all from Morning Mindset Coffee. Like these are people like you start lifing with. It's just like I can't explain. Like I get excited when I talk about this. In fact, like they sent me a video. A bunch of them met up in New York over the weekend, and they were sending me videos of like them just squatting up and like hanging out. And I was like, this is so freaking cool. So if you're tired of doing entrepreneurship alone and you want to level yourself up and you know that like, hey, I need to get to that next level. I need to change my mindset. I need an actual transformation, and I want people to do it with. Morning Mindset Coffee was created for you. If that sounds like you, click on the link. Sign up for a week, do it today, and then I will see you tomorrow morning.
For everyone who hasn't experienced it yet, one of the most powerful things that you can be around is a campfire.
No.
And Marlon, you are someone who understands the campfire effect probably better than anyone that I've ever met in my life. So guys, for what was it? $1? $1.
So,
$1.
Dude, like we
There's this
people joke around like all the time, like, bro, like you're literally giving yourself away for free. I'm like, I know. But like the whole goal was ultimately like to deliver way more value than we ever accepted in monetary payment. It's like I just wanted to remove every barrier of entry, but I do want people to make a decision. But I do want someone to I want them to consider it, because I want you to actually make a decision to show up and be in the room. Don't just sign up and say like, yeah, I'm signed up. No, make a decision to be in the room. Make a decision to transform. It's your life.
There you guys go. For $1 freaking dollar, for pennies, guys. One of the most powerful things out there. I believe the most powerful thing out there is proximity. Proximity is power. And I know the people that Marlon hangs out with, there are people who are just as amazing as he is. If you want to have proximity to someone like freaking Mindset Marlon Johnson, I'm not going to say a few of the others, but a few of the others are actually really close friends of mine who are absolute killers in this game. Go link up, go get connected, get plugged in, and I promise you, you are going to start evolving at light speed.
It's amazing. Marlon, just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story today. It was really cool to hear about your upbringing and how that really shaped you from going to private school and recognizing that you're different than people and how you thought and how you thought differently. And then you turn that into your greatest superpower and making the transition into parkour to real estate, and just the person who you are today is somebody who just actually cares and who actually wants to pour into people. And just really thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your time, and your energy with everybody today. And even the fact that you have a resource that someone is inspired right now, they're excited, giving them an opportunity to go take action, which at the end of the day, we all know that feelings come and go. But if you can turn that feeling into an action, and then you turn that action into a community and a campfire, that's what's going to keep you going forever. So this interview is it's exciting, right? But if you just let that interview leave you excited and then you don't do anything with it, it'll go away. But if you turn that and you turn into a community, go to get around a campfire like Marlon's, that'll last you forever. So just want to say thank you so much for coming on here, sharing your wisdom, sharing your insight. And again, if you guys are interested, go follow. Well, number one, go follow Marlon on Instagram. That's for free, right? And then if you want to go get part of his community, it's a freaking $1 for the first week, which is freaking insane. So go try it out, right? And then honestly, go listen to his podcast. He hosts an amazing podcast that's free as well, and he interviews some really high level entrepreneurs, some really cool people. He actually interviewed Sam on there, and he actually interviewed me. So if you guys want to hear our stories, go check that out on Into the Mind. He's got it on all the freaking platforms: Apple, Spotify, probably Google. I'm not even sure, but I'm sure it's everywhere, right? You can just Google it. It's everywhere. But Marlon, any final words of wisdom that you want to share with the audience here today?
Yeah. Well, first off, I just want to say, Logan, Sam, thank you so much. It absolutely was an honor to be here. I normally am on the other side of the microphone, so I really appreciate this experience. I can't even express how much I appreciate it, because it's giving me an opportunity to grow, right? It's giving me an opportunity to get better and to be able to share my story. And hopefully somebody this resonates with them. Hopefully somebody sees and feels wow, I think very similar to him. I like, oh my gosh, I'm going through that too. And they understand they are not alone. And what I want to say to people is if they find themselves right now in that situation where you are recognizing that you are starting to think a little bit differently, right? And you're kind of at that phase where you're understanding, okay, I need to actually cut out the people that I've spent time with. Like those are some of the maybe more toxic relationships in my life. And you're now going and entering into this phase of isolation, self-induced isolation, which is absolutely fine. Like I think it's one of the healthiest things people can do. Recognize that during that time you might feel like, man, like I'm just totally alone. And that's not true. If you watch this and you watched this up until this long, you're now seeing men on the screen who genuinely know what you're going through. And we want to let you know that there is something on the other side as long as you keep going. There's a new community, there's a new group of people to connect into that it will blow your freaking mind how amazing and how awesome these people will be in your life. And just keep going. Right? If that resonates with you, keep going. And if it resonates with you, like what Sam and Logan are doing here with these origin stories, with the guests that they bring on, it takes a phenomenal amount of work. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes effort, right? They're not getting paid for this in any way, shape, or form. So please recognize like that if they're putting so much value out there, and if it's being valuable to you, share it, right? Actually take the time to share it. And I don't mean just like one of those super generic, like just recopy and paste and put it on your Facebook page. I'm talking like actually think about like, you know what? I know somebody who needs to hear this, right? Or they need to see the episode that they did with Laura Morby, or that they did with Cody Barton, or that they did with JJ, and push it directly to that person and say, hey, you know what? I found a lot of value here, and I thought about you while I was watching it, and I want you to receive this value as well. Pass that gift on to somebody else.
Yeah, and that's for free. And same thing, like go subscribe to Sam. Has got a YouTube now, so this is actually showing on Sam's YouTube. So Sam, what's your thing? What's your handle?
Oh yeah, no, the handle is just go search me up. It's Sam Singh. Still working out the whole youtube.com/thing that's pending.
Just go find Sam Singh on YouTube. If you're watching this on my YouTube, make sure you're subscribed, and also go subscribe to Marlon Johnson. He's on YouTube as well, and that's all free. Like, go do it. Like, go show some love. If you got any value, anything from this, like, first off, subscribe, like it, comment on it, and then, like what Marlon said, like, go share it. And like, should you be intentional with who you share it with, and serve somebody today? Like, go take action. Take action on something. Whether it's a comment, that's an action. Whether it's going and joining Marlon's Mindset Coffee, like, go do something. Take some action today. Do something that makes the world a better place. And so again, Marlon, thank you so much. Sam, thank you for real for just being an amazing co-host and always showing up and always providing so much value, and just appreciate everything that we're all doing together as a community, and just appreciate what we're doing with this podcast. And this is the Origin Story podcast. And so thank you so much for being part of it. Sam Singh is our lovely co-host, Marlon Johnson, amazing guest, and I'm one of the hosts as well, Logan Manzanares. So until next time, guys, we'll be back. We're out.